CrossFit Level 1 training guide, read to you by me, Andy McCann. Use this as a study guide. Good luck, it's a great journey. Understanding CrossFit, the aims, prescription, methodology, implementation, and adaptations of CrossFit are collectively and individually unique, defining of CrossFit, and instrumental in our program's successes in diverse applications. Aims from the beginning. The aim of CrossFit has been to forge a broad, general, and inclusive fitness. We sought to build a program that would best prepare trainees for any physical contingency, prepare them not only for the unknown, but for the unknowable. Looking at all sport and physical tasks collectively, we asked what physical skills and adaptations would most universally lend themselves to performance advantage. Capacity culled from the intersection of all sports demands would quite logically lend itself well to all sport. In sum, our specialty is not specializing. Prescription. CrossFit is constantly varied, high-intensity functional movement. This is our prescription. Functional movements are universal motor recruitment patterns. They are performed in a wave of contraction from core to extremity, and they are compound movements, i.e., they are multi-joint. They are natural, effective, and efficient locomotors of body and external objects. But no aspect of functional movements is more important than their capacity to move large loads over long distances and to do so quickly. Collectively, these three attributes, load, distance, and speed, uniquely qualify functional movements for the production of high power. Intensity is defined exactly as power, and intensity is the independent variable most commonly associated with maximizing the rate of return of favorable adaptation to exercise. Recognizing that the breadth and depth of a programmed stimulus will determine the breadth and depth of the adaptation it elicits. Our prescription of functionality and intensity is constantly varied. We believe that preparation for random physical challenges, i.e. Unknown and unknowable events, is at odds with fixed, predictable, and routine regimens. Methodology. The methodology that drives CrossFit is entirely empirical. We believe that meaningful statements about safety, efficacy, and efficiency, the three most important and interdependent facets to evaluate any fitness program, can be supported only by measurable, observable, repeatable data. We call this approach evidence-based fitness. CrossFit's methodology depends on full disclosure of methods, results, and criticisms, and we have employed the internet to support these values. Our charter is open source, making co-developers out of participating coaches, athletes, and trainers through a spontaneous and collaborative online community. CrossFit is empirically driven, clinically tested, and community developed. Implementation. In implementation, CrossFit is, quite simply, a sport, the sport of fitness. We have learned that harnessing the natural camaraderie, competition, and fun of sport or game yields an intensity that cannot be matched by other means. The late Colonel Jeff Cooper observed that the fear of sporting failure is worse than the fear of death. It is our observation that men will die for points. Using whiteboards as scoreboards, keeping accurate scores and records, running a clock, and precisely defining the rules and standards for performance, we not only motivate unprecedented output, but derive both relative and absolute metrics at every workout. This data has important value well beyond motivation. Adaptations. Our commitment to evidence-based fitness, publicly posting performance data, co-developing our program in collaboration with other coaches, and our open source charter in general have well positioned us to garner important lessons from our program, to learn precisely and accurately, that is, about the adaptations elicited by CrossFit programming. What we have discovered is that CrossFit increases work capacity across broad time and modal domains. See What is Fitness Part 2 article. This is a discovery of great import and has come to motivate our programming and refocus our efforts. This far-reaching increase in work capacity supports our initially stated aims of building a broad, general, and inclusive fitness program. It also explains the wide variety of sport demands met by CrossFit, as evidenced by our deep penetration among diverse sports and endeavors. We have come to see increased work capacity as the holy grail of performance improvement, and all other common metrics like VO2 max, lactate threshold, body composition, and even strength and flexibility as being correlates. derivatives even. We would not trade improvements in any other fitness metric for a decrease in work capacity. Conclusions. The modest start of publicly posting our daily workouts on the internet beginning in 2001 has evolved into a community where human performance is measured and publicly recorded against multiple, diverse, and fixed workloads. CrossFit is an open source engine where inputs from any quarter can be publicly given to demonstrate fitness and fitness programming, and where coaches, trainers, and athletes can collectively advance the art and science of optimizing human performance. Quote, "We've taken high-intensity, constantly varied functional workouts and distilled load, range of motion, exercise, power, work, line of action, flexibility, speed, and all pertinent metabolics to a single value, usually time. This is the sport of fitness. We're best at it." Shout to Coach Glassman Foundations. CrossFit is a core strength and conditioning program. We have designed our program to elicit as broad an adaptational response as possible. CrossFit is not a specialized fitness program, but a deliberate attempt to optimize physical competence in each of 10 fitness domains. They are cardiovascular, respiratory endurance, stamina, strength, flexibility, power, speed, coordination, agility, balance, and accuracy. CrossFit was developed to enhance an individual's competency at all physical tasks. Our athletes are trained to perform successfully at multiple, diverse, and randomized physical challenges. This fitness is demanded of military and police personnel, firefighters, and many sports requiring total or complete physical prowess. CrossFit has proven effective in these arenas. Aside from the breadth or totality of fitness CrossFit seeks, our program is distinctive, if not unique, in its focus on maximizing neuroendocrine response, developing power, cross-training with multiple training modalities, constant training and practice with functional movements, and the development of successful diet strategies. Our athletes are trained to bike, run, swim, and row at short, middle, and long distances, guaranteeing exposure and competency in each of the 3 main metabolic pathways. We train our athletes in gymnastics from rudimentary to advanced movements, garnering great capacity at controlling the body both dynamically and statically while maximizing strength to weight ratio and flexibility. We also place a heavy emphasis on Olympic weightlifting, having seen this sport's unique ability to develop an athlete's explosive power, control of external objects, and mastery of critical motor recruitment patterns. And finally, we encourage and assist our athletes to explore a variety of sports as a vehicle to express and apply their fitness. An effective approach in gyms and health clubs throughout the world. The typical workout consists of isolation movements and extended aerobic sessions. The fitness community, from trainers to the magazines, has the exercising public believing that lateral raises, curls, leg extensions, sit-ups, and the like, combined with 20 to 40-minute stints on the stationary bike or treadmill, are going to lead to some kind of great fitness. Well, at CrossFit, we work exclusively with compound movements and shorter, high-intensity cardiovascular sessions. We have replaced the lateral raise with the push press, the curl with the pull-up, and the leg extension with the squat. For every long-distance effort, our athletes will do 5 or 6 at short distance. Why? Because functional movements and high intensity are radically more effective at eliciting nearly any desired fitness result. Startlingly, this is not a matter of opinion, but solid, irrefutable scientific fact. And yet, the marginally effective old ways persist and are nearly universal. Our approach is consistent with what is practiced in elite training programs associated with major university athletic teams and professional sports. CrossFit endeavors to bring state-of-the-art coaching techniques to the general public and athlete. Is this for me? Absolutely. Your needs and the Olympic athletes differ by degree, not kind. Increased power, speed, strength, cardiovascular, respiratory endurance, flexibility, stamina, coordination, agility, balance, and accuracy are each important to the world's best athletes and to our grandparents. The amazing truth is that the very same methods that elicit optimal response in the Olympic or professional athlete will optimize the same response in the elderly. Of course, we cannot load your grandmother with the same squatting weight that we would assign an Olympic skier, but they both need to squat. In fact, squatting is essential to maintaining functional independence and improving fitness. Squatting is just one example of a movement that is universally valuable and essential, yet rarely taught to any but the most advanced of athletes. This is a tragedy. Through painstakingly thorough coaching and incremental load assignment, CrossFit has been able to teach everyone who can care for himself or herself to perform safely and with maximum efficacy the same movements typically utilized by professional coaches in elite and certainly exclusive environments. Who has benefited from CrossFit? Many professional and elite athletes are participating in CrossFit. Prize fighters, cyclists, surfers, skiers, tennis players, triathletes, and others competing at the highest levels are using CrossFit to advance their core strength and conditioning. But that is not all. CrossFit has tested its methods on the sedentary, overweight, pathological, and elderly, and found that these special populations met the same success as our stable of athletes. We call this bracketing. If our program works for Olympic skiers and overweight sedentary homemakers, then it will work for you. Your current regimen. If your current routine looks somewhat like what we have described as typical of the fitness magazines and gyms, do not despair. Any exercise is better than none, and you have not wasted your time. In fact, the aerobic exercise that you have been doing is an essential foundation to fitness, and the isolation movements have given you some degree of strength. You are in good company. We have found that some of the world's best athletes were sorely lacking in their core strength and conditioning. It is hard to believe, but many elite athletes have achieved international success and are still far from their potential because they have not had the benefit of state-of-the-art coaching methods. Just what is a core strength and conditioning program? CrossFit is a core strength and conditioning program in two distinct senses. First, we are a core strength and conditioning program in the sense that the fitness we develop is foundational to all other athletic needs. This is the same sense in which the university courses required of a particular major are called the core curriculum. This is the stuff that everyone needs. Second, we are a core strength and conditioning program in the literal sense, meaning the center of something. Much of our work focuses on the major functional axis of the human body, the extension and flexion of the hips and torso or trunk. The primacy of core strength and conditioning in this sense is supported by the simple observation that powerful hip extension alone is necessary and nearly sufficient for elite athletic performance. That is, our experience has been that no one without the capacity for powerful hip extension enjoys great athletic prowess, and nearly everyone we have met with that capacity was a great athlete. Running, jumping, punching, and throwing all originate at the core. At CrossFit, we endeavor to develop our athletes from the inside out, from core to extremity, which is, by the way, how good functional movements recruit muscle from the core to the extremities. Can I enjoy optimal health without being an athlete? No! Athletes experience a protection from the ravages of aging and disease that non-athletes never find. For instance, 80-year-old athletes are stronger than non-athletes in their prime at 25 years old. If you think that strength is not important, consider that strength loss is what puts people in nursing homes. Athletes have greater bone density, stronger immune systems, less coronary heart disease, reduced cancer risk, fewer strokes, and less depression than non-athletes. What is an athlete? According to Merriam-Webster's dictionary, an athlete is a person who is trained or skilled in exercises, sports, or games requiring physical strength, agility, or stamina. The CrossFit definition of an athlete is a bit tighter. The CrossFit definition of an athlete is a person who is trained or skilled in strength, power, balance, and agility, flexibility, and endurance. CrossFit holds fitness, health, and athleticism as strongly overlapping constructs. For most purposes, they can be seen as equivalents. What if I do not want to be an athlete? I just want to be healthy. You are in luck. We hear this often, but the truth is that fitness, wellness, and pathology, sickness, are measures of the same entity, your health. There are a multitude of measurable parameters that can be ordered from sick, pathological, to well, normal, to fit, better than normal. These include, but are not limited to, blood pressure, cholesterol, heart rate, body fat, muscle mass, flexibility, and strength. It seems as though all of the body functions that can go awry have states that are pathological, normal, and exceptional, and that elite athletes typically show these parameters in the exceptional range. CrossFit's view is that Fitness and health are the same thing. See What is Fitness? Part 1, Tush article. It is also interesting to notice that the health professional maintains your health with drugs and surgery, each with potentially undesirable side effects, whereas the CrossFit trainer typically achieves a superior result, always with side benefit versus side effect. Examples of CrossFit exercises: biking, running, swimming, and rowing in an endless variety of drills. The clean and jerk, snatch, squat, deadlift, push press, bench press, and power clean. Jumping, medicine ball throws and catches, pull-ups, dips, push-ups, handstands, presses to handstands, pirouettes, kips, cartwheels, muscle-ups, sit-ups, scales, and holds. We make regular use of bikes, the track, rowing shells and ergometers, Olympic weight sets, rings, parallel bars, free exercise mats, horizontal bars, plyometrics boxes, medicine balls, and jump ropes. There is not a strength and conditioning program anywhere that works with a greater diversity of tools, modalities, and drills. What if I do not have time for all of this? It is a common sentiment to feel that because of the obligations of career and family, that you do not have the time to become as fit as you might like. Here's the good news. World-class age group strength and conditioning is obtainable through an hour a day, 6 days per week of training. It turns out that the intensity of training that optimizes physical conditioning is not sustainable past 45 minutes to an hour. Athletes who train for hours a day are developing skill or training for sports that include adaptations inconsistent with elite strength and conditioning. Past 1 hour, more is not better. Fringe athletes. There is a near universal misconception that long-distance athletes are fitter than their short-distance counterparts. The triathlete, cyclist, and marathoner are often regarded as among the fittest athletes on earth. Nothing could be further from the truth. The endurance athlete has trained long past any cardiovascular health benefit and has lost ground in strength, speed, and power. Typically does nothing for coordination, agility, balance, and accuracy, and possesses little more than average flexibility. This is hardly the stuff of elite athleticism. The CrossFit athlete, remember, has trained and practiced for optimal physical competence in all 10 physical skills: cardiovascular, respiratory, endurance, stamina, flexibility, strength, power, speed, coordination, agility, balance, and accuracy. The excessive aerobic volume of the endurance athletes' training costs them in speed, power, and strength to the point that their athletic competency has been compromised. No triathlete is in ideal shape to wrestle, box, pole vault, sprint, play any ball sport, fight fires, or do police work. Each of these requires a fitness level far beyond the needs of the endurance athlete. None of this suggests that being a marathoner, triathlete, or other endurance athlete is a bad thing. Just do not believe that training as a long-distance athlete gives you the fitness that is prerequisite to many sports. CrossFit considers the sumo wrestler, triathlete, marathoner, and powerlifter to be fringe athletes in that their fitness demands are so specialized as to be inconsistent with the adaptations that give maximum competency at all physical challenges. Elite strength and conditioning is a compromise between each of the 10 physical adaptations. Endurance athletes do not balance that compromise: aerobics and anaerobics. There are 3 main energy systems that fuel all human activity. Almost all changes that occur in the body due to exercise are related to the demands placed on these energy systems. Furthermore, the efficacy of any given fitness regimen may largely be tied to its ability to elicit an adequate stimulus for change within these 3 energy systems. Energy is derived aerobically when oxygen is utilized to metabolize substrates derived from food and liberates energy. An activity is termed aerobic when the majority of energy needed is derived aerobically. These activities are usually greater than 90 seconds in duration and involve low to moderate power output or intensity. Examples of aerobic activity include running on the treadmill for 20 minutes, swimming a mile, and watching TV. Energy is derived anaerobically when energy is liberated from substrates in the absence of oxygen. Activities are considered anaerobic when the majority of the energy needed is derived anaerobically. In fact, properly structured anaerobic activity can be used to develop a very high level of aerobic fitness without the muscle wasting, consistent with high-volume aerobic exercise. These activities are of less than 2 minutes in duration and involve moderate to high power output or intensity. There are two such anaerobic systems, the phosphagen or phosphocreatine system and the lactic acid or glycolytic system. Examples of anaerobic activity include running a 100-meter sprint, squatting, and doing pull-ups. Anaerobic and aerobic training support performance variables like strength, power, speed, and endurance. We also support the contention that total conditioning and optimal health necessitate training each of the physiological systems in a systematic fashion. See What is Fitness? Part 1, article. It warrants mention that in any activity, all three energy systems are utilized, though one may dominate. The interplay of these systems can be complex, yet a simple examination of the characteristics of aerobic versus anaerobic training can prove useful. CrossFit's approach is to judiciously balance anaerobic and aerobic exercise in a manner that is consistent with the athlete's goals. Our exercise prescriptions adhere to proper specificity, progression, variation, and recovery to optimize adaptations. The Olympic lifts, aka weightlifting. There are two Olympic lifts, the clean and jerk and the snatch. Mastery of these lifts develops the squat, deadlift, power clean, and split jerk while integrating them into a single movement of unequaled value in all of strength and conditioning. The Olympic lifters are without a doubt the world's strongest athletes. These lifts train athletes to effectively activate more muscle fibers more rapidly than through any other modality of training. The explosiveness that results from this training is of vital necessity to every sport. Practicing the Olympic lifts teaches one to apply force to muscle groups in proper sequence, i.e., from the center of the body to its extremities, core to extremity. Learning this vital technical lesson benefits all athletes who need to impart force to another person or object, as is commonly required in nearly all sports. In addition to learning to impart explosive forces, the clean and jerk and snatch condition the body to receive such forces from another moving body both safely and effectively. Numerous studies have demonstrated the Olympic lift's unique capacity to develop strength, muscle, power, speed, coordination, vertical leap, muscular endurance, bone strength, and the physical capacity to withstand stress. It is also worth mentioning that the Olympic lifts are the only lifts shown to increase maximum oxygen uptake, the most important marker for cardiovascular fitness. Sadly, the Olympic lifts are seldom seen in the commercial fitness community because of their inherently complex and technical nature. CrossFit makes them available to anyone with the patience and persistence to learn. Gymnastics. The extraordinary value of gymnastics as a training modality lies in its reliance on the body's own weight as the sole source of resistance. This places a unique premium on the improvement of strength-to-weight ratio. Unlike other strength training modalities, gymnastics and calisthenics allow for increases in strength only while increasing strength-to-weight ratio. Gymnastics develops pull-ups, squats, lunges, jumping, push-ups, and numerous presses to handstand, scales, and holds. These skills are unrivaled in their benefit to the physique, as evident in any competitive gymnast. As important as the capacity of this modality is for strength development, it is without a doubt the ultimate approach to improving coordination, balance, agility, accuracy, and flexibility. Through the use of numerous presses, handstands, scales, and other floor work, the gymnast's training greatly enhances kinesthetic sense. The variety of movements available for inclusion in this modality probably exceeds the number of exercises known to all non-gymnastic sport. The rich variety here contributes substantially to CrossFit's ability to inspire great athletic confidence and prowess. For a combination of strength, flexibility, well-developed physique, coordination, balance, accuracy, and agility, the gymnast has no equal in the sports world. The inclusion of this training modality is absurdly absent from nearly all training programs. Routines. There is no ideal routine. In fact, the chief value of any routine lies in abandoning it for another. The CrossFit ideal is to train for any contingency. The obvious implication is that this is possible only if there is a tremendously varied quality to the breadth of stimulus. It is in this sense that CrossFit is a core strength and conditioning program. Anything else is sport-specific training, not core strength and conditioning. Any routine, no matter how complete, contains within its omissions the parameters for which there will be no adaptation. The breadth of adaptation will exactly match the breadth of the stimulus. For this reason, CrossFit embraces short, middle, and long distance metabolic conditioning and low, moderate, and heavy load assignment. We encourage creative and continuously varied compositions that tax physiological functions against every realistically conceivable combination of stressors. This is the stuff of surviving fights and fires. Developing a fitness that is varied yet complete defines the very art of strength and conditioning coaching. This is not a comforting message in an age when scientific certainty and specialization confer authority and expertise. Yet, the reality of performance enhancement cares not one whit for trend or authority. CrossFit's success in elevating the performance of world-class athletes lies clearly in demanding of our athletes total and complete physical competence. No routine takes us there. Neuroendocrine adaptation. Neuroendocrine adaptation is a change in the body that affects you either neurologically or hormonally. Most important adaptations to exercise are in part or completely a result of a hormonal or neurological shift. Research has shown which exercise protocols maximize neuroendocrine responses. Earlier, we faulted isolation movements as being ineffectual. Now, we can tell you that one of the critical elements missing from these movements is that they invoke essentially no neuroendocrine response. Among the hormonal responses vital to athletic development are substantial increases in testosterone, insulin-like growth factor, and human growth hormone. Exercising with protocols known to elevate these hormones eerily mimics the hormonal changes sought in exogenous hormonal therapy, steroid use, with none of the deleterious effect. Exercise regimens that induce a high neuroendocrine response produce champions. Increased muscle mass and bone density are just two of many adaptive responses to exercises capable of producing a significant neuroendocrine response. It is impossible to overstate the importance of the neuroendocrine response to exercise protocols. Heavy load weight training, short rest between sets, high heart rates, high intensity training, and short rest intervals, though not entirely distinct components, are all associated with a high neuroendocrine response. Power is defined as the time rate of doing work. It has often been said that in sport, speed is king. At CrossFit, power is the undisputed king of performance. Power is, in simplest terms, hard and fast. Jumping, punching, throwing, and sprinting are all measures of power. Increasing your ability to produce power is necessary and nearly sufficient to elite athleticism. Additionally, power is the definition of intensity, which in turn has been linked to nearly every positive aspect of fitness. Increases in strength, performance, muscle mass, and bone density all arise in proportion to the intensity of exercise. And again, intensity is defined as power. Power development is an ever-present aspect of the CrossFit.com Workout of the Day, WOD. Cross-training. Cross-training is typically defined as participating in multiple sports. At CrossFit, we take a much broader view of the term. We view cross-training as exceeding the normal parameters of the regular demands of your sport or training. CrossFit recognizes functional, metabolic, and modal cross-training. That is, we regularly train past the normal motions, metabolic pathways, and modes or sports common to the athlete's sport or exercise regimen. We are unique and again distinctive to the extent that we adhere to and program within this context. If you remember CrossFit's objective of providing a broad-based fitness that provides maximal competency in all adaptive capacities, then cross-training or training outside of the athlete's normal or regular demands is a given. Long ago, we noticed that athletes are weakest at the margins of their exposure for almost every measurable parameter. For instance, if you only cycle between 5 and 7 miles at each training effort, you will test weak at less than 5 and greater than 7 miles. This is true for range of motion, load, rest, intensity, power, etc. CrossFit workouts are engineered to expand the margins of exposure as broad as function and capacity will allow. Quote, the CrossFit concept can be viewed as functional atomism in that we strive to reduce human performance to a limited number of movements that are simple, irreducible, indivisible functions. Teaching an athlete to run, jump, throw, punch, squat, lunge, push, pull, and climb powerfully, with mechanical efficiency and soundness across a broad range of time intensity protocols, with rapid recovery establishes a foundation that will give unprecedented advantage in learning new sports, mastering existing skills, and surviving unforeseeable challenges. Coach Glassman Functional Movements. There are movements that mimic motor recruitment patterns that are found in everyday life. Others are somewhat unique to the gym. Squatting is standing from a seated position. Deadlifting is picking any object off the ground. They are both functional movements. Leg extension and leg curl both have no equivalent in nature and are in turn non-functional movements. The bulk of isolation movements are non-functional movements. By contrast, the compound or multi-joint movements are functional. Natural movement typically involves the movement of multiple joints for every activity. Functional movements are mechanically sound and therefore safe, and they also elicit a high neuroendocrine response. CrossFit has managed a stable of elite athletes and dramatically enhanced their performance exclusively with functional movements. The superiority of training with functional movements is clearly apparent with any athlete within weeks of their incorporation. The soundness and efficacy of functional movements are so profound that exercising without them is, by comparison, a colossal waste of time. Diet. The CrossFit dietary prescription is as follows. Protein should be lean and varied and account for about 30% of your total caloric load. Carbohydrates should be predominantly low glycemic and account for about 40% of your total caloric load. Fat should be from whole food sources and account for about 30% of your total caloric load. Total calories should be based on protein needs, which should be set at between 0.7 and 1.0 grams of protein per pound of lean body mass, depending on your activity level. The 0.7 figure is for moderate daily workout loads, and the 1.0 figure is for the hardcore athlete. What should I eat? In plain language, base your diet on garden vegetables, especially greens, meats, nuts, and seeds, some fruit, little starch, and no sugar. That is about as simple as we can get. Many have observed that keeping your grocery cart to the perimeter of the grocery store while avoiding the aisles is a great way to protect your health. Food is perishable. The stuff with long shelf life is all suspect. If you follow these simple guidelines, you will benefit from nearly all that can be achieved through nutrition. The caveman or Paleolithic model for nutrition. Modern diets are ill-suited for our genetic composition. Evolution has not kept pace with advances in agriculture and food processing, resulting in a plague of health problems for modern man. Coronary heart disease, diabetes, cancer, osteoporosis, obesity, and psychological dysfunction have all been scientifically linked to a diet too high in refined or processed carbohydrate. The caveman model is perfectly consistent with CrossFit's prescription. What foods should I avoid? Excessive consumption of high glycemic carbohydrates is the primary culprit in nutritionally caused health problems. High glycemic carbohydrates are those that raise blood sugar too rapidly. They include rice, bread, candy, potato, sweets, sodas, and most processed carbohydrates. Processing can include bleaching, baking, grinding, and refining. Processing of carbohydrates greatly increases their glycemic index, a measure of their propensity to elevate blood sugar. What is the problem with high glycemic carbohydrates? The problem with high glycemic carbohydrates is that in excess, they give an inordinate insulin response. Insulin is an essential hormone for life, yet acute chronic elevation of insulin leads to hyperinsulinism, which has been positively linked to obesity, elevated cholesterol levels, blood pressure, mood dysfunction, and a Pandora's box of disease and disability. Research hyperinsulinism, CrossFit's prescription, is a low glycemic diet and relatively lower in total carbohydrate quantity, and consequently severely blunts the insulin response, yet still provides ample nutrition for rigorous activity. What is fitness and who is fit? In 1997, Outside Magazine crowned triathlete Mark Allen the fittest man on earth. Let us just assume for a moment that this famous 6-time winner of the Ironman triathlon is the fittest of the fit. Then what title do we bestow on the decathlete Simon Pullman, who also possesses incredible endurance and stamina, yet crushes Mr. Allen in any comparison that includes strength, power, speed, and coordination? Perhaps the definition of fitness does not include strength, speed, power, and coordination, though that seems rather odd. Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary defines fitness and being fit as the ability to transmit genes and being healthy. No help there. Searching the internet for a workable, reasonable definition of fitness yields disappointingly little. Worse yet, the National Strength and Conditioning Association, NSCA, the most respected publisher in exercise physiology, in its highly authoritative Essentials of Strength Training and Conditioning, does not even attempt a definition. Quote, world-class fitness in 100 words: eat meat and vegetables, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch, and no sugar. Keep intake to levels that will support exercise but not body fat. Practice and train major lifts: deadlift, clean, squat, presses, C and J, clean and jerk, and snatch. Similarly, master the basics of gymnastics: pull-ups, dips, rope climbs, push-ups, sit-ups, presses to handstands, pirouettes, flips, splits, and holds, bike, run, swim, row, etc., hard and fast, 5 or 6 days per week. Mix these elements in as many combinations and patterns as creativity will allow. Routine is the enemy. Keep workouts short and intense. Regularly learn and play new sports. Greg Glassman. CrossFit's Fitness for CrossFit. The specter of championing a fitness program without clearly defining what it is that the program delivers combines elements of fraud and farce. The vacuum of guiding authority has therefore necessitated that CrossFit provides its own definition of fitness. That is what this article is about. Our fitness. Our pondering, studying, debating about, and finally defining fitness have played a formative role in CrossFit's successes. The keys to understanding the methods and achievements of CrossFit are perfectly embedded in our view of fitness and basic exercise science. It will come as no surprise to most of you that our view of fitness is a contrarian view. The general public, both in opinion and in media, holds endurance athletes as exemplars of fitness. We do not. Our incredulity on learning of outsides awarding a triathlete the title of fittest man on earth becomes apparent in light of CrossFit's models for assessing and defining fitness. CrossFit makes use of 4 different models for evaluating and guiding fitness. Collectively, these 4 models provide the basis for CrossFit's definition of fitness. The first is based on the 10 general physical skills widely recognized by exercise physiologists. The second model is based on the performance of athletic tasks. The third is based on the energy systems that drive all human action. The fourth uses health markers as a measure of fitness. Each model is critical to CrossFit, and each has distinct utility in evaluating an athlete's overall fitness or a strength and conditioning regimen's efficacy. Before explaining in detail how each of these 4 models works, it warrants mention that we are not attempting to demonstrate our program's legitimacy through scientific principles. We are but sharing the methods of a program whose legitimacy has been established through the testimony of athletes, soldiers, cops, and others whose lives or livelihoods depend on fitness. CrossFit's first fitness model. The 10 general physical skills. There are 10 recognized general physical skills. They are cardiovascular, respiratory endurance, stamina, strength, flexibility, power, speed, coordination, agility, balance, and accuracy. See Figure 2. 10 general physical skills for definitions. You are as fit as you are competent in each of these 10 skills. A regimen develops fitness to the extent that it improves each of these 10 skills. Importantly, improvements in endurance, stamina, strength, and flexibility come about through training. Training refers to activity that improves performance through a measurable organic change in the body. By contrast, improvements in coordination, agility, balance, and accuracy come about through practice. Practice refers to activity that improves performance through changes in the nervous system. Power and speed are adaptations of both training and practice. Figure 2. 10 general physical skills. If your goal is optimum physical competence, then all the general physical skills must be considered. 1. Cardiovascular, respiratory endurance, the ability of body systems to gather, process, and deliver oxygen. 2. Stamina, the ability of body systems to process, deliver, store, and utilize energy. 3rd, strength, the ability of a muscular unit or combination of muscular units to apply force. 4. Flexibility, the ability to maximize the range of motion at a given joint. 5. Power, the ability of a muscular unit or combination of muscular units to apply maximum force in minimum time. 6. Speed, the ability to minimize the time cycle of a repeated movement. 7. Coordination, the ability to combine several distinct movement patterns into a singular distinct movement. 8. Agility, the ability to minimize transition time from one movement pattern to another. 9. Balance, the ability to control the placement of the body's center of gravity in relation to its support base. 10. Accuracy, the ability to control movement in a given direction or at a given intensity. Thanks to Jim Cawley and Bruce Evans of Dynamax. CrossFit's second fitness model, the hopper. The essence of this model is the view that fitness is about performing well at any and every task imaginable. Picture a hopper loaded with an infinite number of physical challenges where no selective mechanism is operative and being asked to perform feats randomly drawn from the hopper. This model suggests that your fitness can be measured by your capacity to perform well at these tasks in relation to other individuals. The implication here is that fitness requires an ability to perform well at all tasks, even unfamiliar tasks and tasks combined in infinitely varying combinations. In practice, this encourages the athlete to disinvest in any set notions of sets, rest periods, reps, exercises, order of exercises, routines, periodization, etc. Nature frequently provides largely unforeseeable challenges. Train for that by striving to keep the training stimulus broad and constantly varied. CrossFit's third fitness model. The metabolic pathways. There are 3 metabolic pathways that provide the energy for all human action. These metabolic engines are known as the phosphagen or phosphocreatine pathway, the glycolytic or lactate pathway, and the oxidative or aerobic pathway, Table 1, Figure 3. The first, the phosphagen, dominates the highest powered activities, those that last less than about 10 seconds. The second pathway, the glycolytic, dominates moderate powered activities, those that last up to several minutes. The third pathway, the oxidative, dominates low powered activities, those that last in excess of several minutes. Total fitness, the fitness that CrossFit promotes and develops, requires competency and training in each of these 3 pathways or engines. Balancing the effects of these 3 pathways largely determines the how and why of the metabolic conditioning or cardio that we do at CrossFit, favoring one or two to the exclusion of the others, and not recognizing the impact of excessive training in the oxidative pathway are arguably the 2 most common faults in fitness training. More on that later. CrossFit's fourth fitness model, sickness, wellness, fitness continuum. There is another aspect to CrossFit's fitness that is of great interest and immense value to us. We have observed that nearly every measurable value of health can be placed on a continuum that ranges from sickness to wellness to fitness, Figure 4. Though tougher to measure, we would even add mental health to this observation. Depression is clearly mitigated by proper diet and exercise. For example, a blood pressure of 160 over 95 is pathological, 120 over 70 is normal or healthy, and 105 over 55 is consistent with an athlete's blood pressure. A body fat of 40% is pathological, 20% is normal or healthy, and 10% is fit. We observe a similar ordering for bone density, triglycerides, muscle mass, flexibility, high density lipoprotein, HDL, or good cholesterol, resting heart rate, and dozens of other common measures of health, Table 2. Many authorities, e.g. MEL-CIF, the NSCA, make a clear distinction between health and fitness. Frequently, they cite studies that suggest that the fit may not be health protected. A close look at the supporting evidence invariably reveals the studied group is endurance athletes and, we suspect, endurance athletes on a dangerous fad diet. High carbohydrate, low fat, low protein. Done right, fitness provides a great margin of protection against the ravages of time and disease. Where you find otherwise, examine the fitness protocol, especially diet. Fitness is and should be super wellness. Sickness, wellness, and fitness are measures of the same entity. A fitness regimen that does not support health is not CrossFit. Common ground. The motivation for the 4 models is simply to ensure the broadest and most general fitness possible. Our first model evaluates our efforts against a full range of general physical adaptations. In the second, the focus is on breadth and depth of performance. With the third, the measure is time, power, and consequently energy systems. And the fourth is on health markers. It should be fairly clear that the fitness that CrossFit advocates and develops is deliberately broad, general, and inclusive. Our specialty is not specializing. Combat, survival, many sports, and life reward this kind of fitness, and on average, punish the specialist. Implementation. Our fitness, being CrossFit, comes through molding men and women who are equal parts gymnast, Olympic weightlifter, and multimodal sprinter or sprint athlete. Develop the capacity of a novice 800-meter track athlete, gymnast, and weightlifter, and you will be fitter than any world-class runner, gymnast, or weightlifter. Let us look at how CrossFit incorporates metabolic conditioning, cardio, gymnastics, and weightlifting to forge the world's fittest men and women. Metabolic conditioning or cardio. Biking, running, swimming, rowing, speed skating, and cross-country skiing are collectively known as metabolic conditioning. In the common vernacular, they are referred to as cardio. CrossFit's third fitness model, the one that deals with metabolic pathways, contains the seeds of the CrossFit cardio prescription. To understand the CrossFit approach to cardio, we need first to briefly cover the nature and interaction of the three major pathways. Of the three metabolic pathways, the first two, the phosphagen and the glycolytic, are anaerobic, and the third, the oxidative, is aerobic. We need not belabor the biochemical significance of aerobic and anaerobic systems. Suffice it to say that understanding the nature and interaction of anaerobic exercise and aerobic exercise is vital to understanding conditioning. Just remember that efforts at moderate to high power and lasting less than several minutes are predominantly anaerobic, and efforts at low power and lasting in excess of several minutes are predominantly aerobic. As an example, the sprints at 100, 200, 400, and 800 meters are largely anaerobic, and events like 1,500 meters, the mile, 2,000 meters, and 3,000 meters are largely aerobic. Aerobic training benefits cardiovascular function and decreases body fat, all good. Aerobic conditioning allows us to engage in low-power extended efforts efficiently, cardiorespiratory endurance and stamina. This is critical to many sports. Athletes engaged in sports or training where a preponderance of the training load is spent in aerobic efforts witness decreases in muscle mass, strength, speed, and power. It is not uncommon to find marathoners with a vertical leap of only several inches. Furthermore, aerobic activity has a pronounced tendency to decrease anaerobic capacity. This does not bode well for most athletes or those interested in elite fitness. Anaerobic activity also benefits cardiovascular function and decreases body fat. In fact, anaerobic exercise is superior to aerobic exercise for fat loss. Anaerobic activity is, however, unique in its capacity to dramatically improve power, speed, strength, and muscle mass. Anaerobic conditioning allows us to exert tremendous forces over brief time intervals. One aspect of anaerobic conditioning that bears great consideration is that anaerobic conditioning will not adversely affect aerobic capacity. In fact, properly structured anaerobic activity can be used to develop a very high level of aerobic fitness without the muscle wasting consistent with high volumes of aerobic exercise. The method by which we use anaerobic efforts to develop aerobic conditioning is interval training. Basketball, football, gymnastics, boxing, track events under 1 mile, soccer, swimming events under 400 meters, volleyball, wrestling, and weightlifting are all sports that require the vast majority of training time to be spent in anaerobic activity. Long distance and ultra endurance running, cross-country skiing, and 1,500 plus meter swimming are all sports that require aerobic training at levels that produce results unacceptable to other athletes or the individual concerned with total conditioning and optimal health. We strongly recommend that you attend a track meet of nationally or internationally competitive athletes. Pay close attention to the physiques of the athletes competing at 100, 200, 400, and 800 meters and the milers. The difference you are sure to notice is a direct result of training at those distances. Interval training. The key to developing the cardiovascular system without an unacceptable loss of strength, speed, and power is interval training. Interval training mixes bouts of work and rest in timed intervals. Table 3 gives guidelines for interval training. We can control the dominant metabolic pathway conditioned by varying the duration of the work and rest interval and number of interval repetitions. Note that the phosphagen pathway is the dominant pathway in intervals of 10 to 30 seconds of work, followed by rest of 30 to 90 seconds, work. Recovery 1 to 3, repeated 25 to 30 times. The glycolytic pathway is the dominant pathway in intervals of 30 to 120 seconds of work, followed by rest of 60 to 240 seconds, work, recovery 1 to 2, repeated 10 to 20 times. And finally, the oxidative pathway is the dominant pathway in intervals of 120 to 300 seconds of work, followed by rest of 120 to 300 seconds, work, recovery 1 to 1, repeated 3 to 5 times. The bulk of metabolic training should be interval training. Interval training need not be so structured or formal. One example would be to sprint between one set of telephone poles and jog between the next set, alternating in this manner for the duration of a run. One example of an interval that CrossFit makes regular use of is the Tabata interval, which is 20 seconds of work followed by 10 seconds of rest, repeated 8 times. Dr. Izumi Tabata published research that demonstrated that this interval protocol produced remarkable increases in both anaerobic and aerobic capacity. It is highly desirable to regularly experiment with interval patterns of varying combinations of rest, work, and repetitions. Some of the best resources on interval training come from Dr. Steven Seeler. His articles on interval training and the time course of training adaptations contain the seeds of CrossFit's heavy reliance on interval training. The article on the time course of training adaptations explains that there are 3 waves of adaptation to endurance training. The first wave is increased maximal oxygen consumption. The second is increased lactate threshold. The third is increased efficiency. In the CrossFit concept, we are interested in maximizing first wave adaptations and procuring the second systemically through multiple modalities, including weight training and avoiding completely third wave adaptations. Second and third wave adaptations are highly specific to the activity in which they are developed and can be detrimental with too much focus to the broad fitness that we advocate and develop. A clear understanding of this material has prompted us to advocate regular high-intensity training in as many training modalities as possible through largely anaerobic efforts and intervals while deliberately and specifically avoiding the efficiency that accompanies mastery of a single modality. It is at first ironic that our interpretation of Dr. Seeler's work was not his intention, but when our quest of optimal physical competence is viewed in light of Dr. Seeler's more specific aim of maximizing endurance performance, our interpretation is powerful. Dr. Seeler's work, incidentally, makes clear the fallacy of assuming that endurance work is of greater benefit to the cardiovascular system than higher intensity interval work. This is very important. With interval training, we get all of the cardiovascular benefit of endurance work without the attendant loss of strength, speed, and power. Gymnastics. Our use of the term gymnastics not only includes the traditional competitive sport that we have seen on TV, but all activities like climbing, yoga, calisthenics, and dance, where the aim is body control. It is within this realm of activities that we can develop extraordinary strength, especially upper body and trunk, flexibility, coordination, balance, agility, and accuracy. In fact, the traditional gymnast has no peer in terms of development of these skills. CrossFit uses short parallel bars, mats, still rings, pull-up and dip bars, and a climbing rope to implement our gymnastics training. The starting place for gymnastic competency lies with the well-known calisthenic movements: pull-ups, push-ups, dips, and rope climbs. These movements need to form the core of your upper body strength work. Set goals for achieving benchmarks like 20, 25, and 30 pull-ups, 50, 75, and 185 pull-ups, 100 push-ups, 20, 30, 40, and 50 dips, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 consecutive trips up the rope without any use of the feet or legs. At 15 pull-ups and dips each, it is time to start working regularly on a muscle up. The muscle up is moving from a hanging position below the rings to a supported position, arms extended above the rings. It is a combination movement containing both a pull-up and a dip. Far from a contrivance, the muscle up is hugely functional. With a muscle up, you will be able to surmount any object on which you can get a finger hold. If you can touch it, you can get up on it. The value here for survival, police, firefighter, and military use is impossible to overstate. Pull-ups and dips are the key to developing the muscle up. While developing your upper body strength with the pull-ups, push-ups, dips, and rope climbs, a large measure of balance and accuracy can be developed through mastering the handstand. Start with a headstand against the wall if you need to. Once reasonably comfortable with the inverted position of the headstand, you can practice kicking up to the handstand again against a wall. Later, take the handstand to the short parallel bars or parallettes without the benefit of the wall. After you can hold a handstand for several minutes without benefit of the wall or a spotter, it is time to develop a pirouette. A pirouette is lifting one arm and turning on the supporting arm 90 degrees to regain the handstand, then repeating this with alternate arms until you have turned 180 degrees. This skill needs to be practiced until it can be done with little chance of falling from the handstand. Work in intervals of 90 degrees as benchmarks of your growth. 90, 180, 270, 360, 450, 540, 630, and finally 720 degrees. Walking on the hands is another fantastic tool for developing both the handstand and balance and accuracy. A football field or sidewalk is an excellent place to practice and measure your progress. You want to be able to walk 100 yards in the handstand without falling. Competency in the handstand readies the athlete for handstand presses. There is a family of presses that range from relatively easy ones that any beginning gymnast can perform to ones so difficult that only the best gymnasts competing at national levels can perform. Their hierarchy of difficulty is bent arm, bent body, hip, bent leg, straight arm, bent body, bent leg, straight arm, bent body, straight leg, and bent arm, straight body, straight leg, and finally the monster, straight arm, straight body, straight leg. It is not unusual to take 10 years to get these 5 presses. The trunk flexion work in gymnastics is beyond anything you will see anywhere else. Even the beginning gymnastics trunk movements cripple bodybuilders, weightlifters, and martial artists. The basic sit-up and L-hold are the staples. The L-hold is nothing more than holding your trunk straight while supported by locked arms with hands on a bench, the floor, or parallel bars. The hips are kept at 90 degrees with legs straight out in front of you. You want to work towards a 3-minute hold in benchmark increments of 30 seconds, 30, 60, 90, 120, 150, and 180 seconds. When you can hold an L for 3 minutes, all your old AB work will be silly easy. We recommend Bob Anderson's stretching. This is a simple, no-nonsense approach to flexibility. The science of stretching is weakly developed, and many athletes, like gymnasts, who demonstrate great flexibility receive no formal instruction. Just do it. Generally, you want to stretch in a warm-up to establish safe, effective range of motion for the ensuing activity, and stretch during cool-down to improve flexibility. There's a lot of material to work with here. We highly recommend an adult gymnastics program if there is one in your area. Our friends at Drills and Skills have enough material to keep you busy for years. This is among our favorite fitness sites. Every workout should contain regular gymnastics/calisthenic movements that you have mastered and other elements under development. Much of the rudiments of gymnastics come only with great effort and frustration. That is acceptable. The return is unprecedented and the most frustrating elements are most beneficial, long before you have developed even a modicum of competency. Quote, much of the rudiments of gymnastics come only with great effort and frustration. That is acceptable. Coach Glassman. Quote, if strength at high heart rates is fundamental to your sport, then you'd best perform your resistance training at high heart rate. Coach Glassman. Weightlifting. Weightlifting, as opposed to weightlifting or weight training, refers to the Olympic sport, which includes the clean and jerk and the snatch. Weightlifting, as it is often referred to, develops strength, especially in the hips, speed and power, like no other training modality. It is little known that successful weightlifting requires substantial flexibility. Olympic weightlifters are as flexible as any athletes. The benefits of weightlifting do not end with strength, speed, power, and flexibility. The clean and jerk and the snatch both develop coordination, agility, accuracy, and balance, and to no small degree. Both of these lifts are as nuanced and challenging as any movement in all of sport. Moderate competency in the Olympic lifts confers added prowess to any sport. The Olympic lifts are based on the deadlift, clean, squat, and jerk. These movements are the starting point for any serious weight training program. In fact, they should serve as the core of your resistance training throughout your life. Why the deadlift, clean, squat, and jerk? Because these movements elicit a profound neuroendocrine response. That is, they alter you hormonally and neurologically, the changes that occur through these movements are essential to athletic development. Most of the development that occurs as a result of exercise is systemic and a direct result of hormonal and neurological changes. Curls, lateral raises, leg extensions, leg curls, flies, and other bodybuilding movements have no place in a serious strength and conditioning program, primarily because they have a blunted neuroendocrine response, a distinctive feature of these. Relatively worthless movements is that they have no functional analog in everyday life, and they work only one joint at a time. Compare this to the deadlift, clean, squat, and jerk, which are functional and multi-joint movements. Start your weightlifting career with the deadlift, clean, squat, and jerk. Then, introduce the clean and jerk and snatch. Much of the best weight training material on the internet is found on powerlifting sites. Powerlifting is the sport of 3 lifts: the bench press, squat, and deadlift. Powerlifting is a superb start to a lifting program, followed later by the more dynamic clean and the jerk, and finally the clean and jerk and the snatch. The movements that we are recommending are very demanding and very athletic. As a result, they have kept athletes interested and intrigued, where the typical fare offered in most gyms, bodybuilding movements, typically bores athletes to distraction. Weightlifting is sport, weight training is not. Throwing our program includes not only weightlifting and powerlifting, but also throwing work with medicine balls. The medicine ball work we favor provides both physical training and general movement practice. We are huge fans of the Dynamax medicine ball and associated throwing exercises. The medicine ball drills add another potent stimulus for strength, power, speed, coordination, agility, balance, and accuracy. There is a medicine ball game known as Hoover Ball. It is played with an 8-foot volleyball net and scored like tennis. This game burns 3 times more calories than tennis and is great fun. The history and rules of Hoover Ball are available from the internet. Nutrition. Nutrition plays a critical role in your fitness. Proper nutrition can amplify or diminish the effect of your training efforts. Effective nutrition is moderate in protein, carbohydrate, and fat. Forget about the fad, high carbohydrate, low fat, and low protein diet. Balanced macronutrient and healthy nutrition looks more like 40% carbohydrate, 30% protein, and 30% fat. Dr. Barry Sears' Zone Diet still offers the greatest precision, efficacy, and health benefit of any clearly defined protocol. The Zone Diet does an adequate job of jointly managing issues of blood glucose control, proper macronutrient proportion, and caloric restriction, whether your concern is athletic performance, disease prevention and longevity, or body composition. We recommend that everyone read Dr. Sears' book, Enter the Zone. See also Zone Meal Plans article. Sport plays a wonderful role in fitness. Sport is the application of fitness in a fantastic atmosphere of competition and mastery. Training efforts typically include relatively predictable, repetitive movements and provide limited opportunity for the essential combination of our 10 general physical skills. It is, after all, the combined expression or application of the 10 general skills that is our motivation for their development in the first place. Sports and games like soccer, martial arts, baseball, and basketball, in contrast to our training workouts, have more varied and less predictable movements. But where sports develop and require all 10 general skills simultaneously, they do so slowly compared to our strength and conditioning regimen. Sport is better, in our view, at expression and testing of skills than it is at developing these same skills. Both expression and development are crucial to our fitness. Sport, in many respects, more closely mimics the demands of nature than does our training. We encourage and expect our athletes to engage in regular sports efforts in addition to all of their strength and conditioning work. A theoretical hierarchy of development. A theoretical hierarchy exists for the development of an athlete, Figure 5. It starts with nutrition and moves to metabolic conditioning, gymnastics, weightlifting, and finally sport. This hierarchy largely reflects foundational dependence, skill, and to some degree time ordering of development. The logical flow is from molecular foundations to cardiovascular sufficiency, body control, external object control, and ultimately mastery and application. This model has greatest utility in analyzing athletes' shortcomings or difficulties. We do not deliberately order these components, but nature will. If you have a deficiency at any level of the pyramid, the components above will suffer. Integration. Every regimen, every routine contains within its structure a blueprint for its deficiency. If you only work your weight training at low reps, you will not develop the localized muscular endurance that you might have otherwise. If you work high reps exclusively, you will not build the same strength or power that you would have at low reps. There are advantages and disadvantages to working out slowly or quickly, with high weights or low weights, completing cardio before or after, etc. For the fitness that we are pursuing, every parameter within your control needs to be modulated to broaden the stimulus as much as possible. Your body will only respond to an unaccustomed stressor. Routine is the enemy of progress and broad adaptation. Do not subscribe to high reps, or low reps, or long rests, or short rests, but strive for variance. So then, what are we to do? Work on becoming a better weightlifter? Stronger, better. Gymnast and faster rower, runner, swimmer, cyclist is the answer. There are an infinite number of workouts that will deliver the goods. Generally, we have found that 3 days on and 1 day off allows for a maximum sustainability at maximum intensities. One of our favorite workout patterns is to warm up and then perform 3 to 5 sets of 3 to 5 reps of a fundamental lift at a moderately comfortable pace, followed by a 10-minute circuit of gymnastics elements at a blistering pace, and finally finish with 2 to 10 minutes of high-intensity metabolic conditioning. There is nothing sacred in this pattern. The magic is in the movements, not the routine. Be creative. Another favorite is to blend elements of gymnastics and weightlifting in couplets that combine to make a dramatic metabolic challenge. An example would be to perform 5 reps of a moderately heavy back squat, followed immediately by a set of max reps, pull-ups, repeated 3 to 5 times. On other occasions, we will take 5 or 6 elements balanced between weightlifting, metabolic conditioning, and gymnastics, and combine them in a single circuit that we blow through 3 times without a break. We can create routines like this forever. In fact, our CrossFit.com archives contain thousands of daily workouts consciously mixed and varied in this manner. Perusing them will give you an idea of how we mix and modulate our key elements. We have not mentioned here our penchant for jumping, kettlebells, odd object lifting, and obstacle course work. The recurring theme of functionality and variety clearly suggests the need and validity for their inclusion, though. Finally, strive to blur distinctions between cardio and strength training. Nature has no regard for this distinction or any other, including our 10 physical adaptations. We will use weights and plyometrics training to elicit a metabolic response in sprinting to improve strength. Quote, "The needs of an Olympic athlete and our grandparents differ by degree, not kind." Coach Glassman. Scalability and applicability. The question regularly arises as to the applicability of a regimen like CrossFit's to older and deconditioned or untrained populations. The needs of an Olympic athlete and our grandparents differ by degree, not kind. One is looking for functional dominance, the other for functional competence. Competence and dominance manifest through identical physiological mechanisms. We have used our same routines for elderly individuals with heart disease and cage fighters 1 month out from televised bouts. We scale load and intensity. We do not change programs. We get requests from athletes from every sport looking for a strength and conditioning program for their sport. Firemen, soccer players, triathletes, boxers, and surfers all want programs that conform to the specificity of their needs. While we admit that there are surely needs specific to any sport, the bulk of sport-specific training has been ridiculously ineffective. The need for specificity is nearly completely met by regular practice and training within the sport, not in the strength and conditioning environment. Our terrorist hunters, skiers, mountain bikers, and housewives have found their best fitness from the same regimen. What is fitness? Part 2. This concept started with me having what I call a belief in fitness. I was, and still am, of the view that there is a physical capacity that would lend itself generally well to any and all contingencies, to the likely, to the unlikely, to the known, to the unknown. This physical capacity is different than the fitness required for sport. One of the things that demarcates sport is how much we know about the event's physiological demands. Instead, we are chasing headlong this concept of fitness as a broad, general, and inclusive adaptive capacity, a fitness that would prepare you for the unknown and the unknowable. and we went to the literature to look for such a definition and could not find anything. The information we did find seemed esoteric, irrelevant, or flawed, logically and or scientifically. For example, to date, the American College of Sports Medicine, ACSM, cannot give a scientific definition of fitness. They give a definition, but it contains nothing that can be measured. If it is not measurable, it is not a valid definition. The first three models. And so we started playing with the definition and came out with three operational models. They were clumsy, but they had utility. They guided us and kept us on this path towards this fitness. The first model originated from Jim Cawley and Bruce Evans of Dynamax Medicine Balls. They produced a list of physiological adaptations that represented the gamut of potential physiological adaptations in an exercise program. You can improve cardiorespiratory endurance, stamina, strength, flexibility, power, speed, coordination, accuracy, agility, and balance by exercising. They gave reasonable definitions to each of these 10 so that they seemed fairly distinct. Keep in mind, however, nature has no obligation to recognize these distinctions. They are completely man-made. This model is an abstraction to help us understand fitness better. What we did with this was we said that a person was as fit as he or she was developed in breadth and depth in those 10 capacities. And to the extent that he or she was deficient in one capacity relative to any cohort, he or she was less fit. This is a balance, a compromise of physiological adaptation. The second model is a statistical model based on training modality. A hopper, like those used to determine a lottery winner, is loaded with as many skills and drills from as many different sports and strength and conditioning regimens imaginable. It could be agility drills from track, 1-rep max bench press from football, Fran, Helen, and Diane from CrossFit, Pilates, and yoga. Do not exclude anything, the more the better. Then, line up everyone willing to participate, turn the handle, pull a task out at random, and put them to the test. Here is the contention. He or she who performs best at these randomly assigned physical tasks is the fittest. It may very well be that the fittest man on earth is in the 75th percentile for each event picked. In fact, being best at many things would tell me immediately that you are not as fit as you could be. For instance, if you have a 4-minute mile time, thousands of people are much fitter than you. Part of the adaptation to get a 4-minute mile is that it coincides with the max bench press of about half body weight and a vertical leap of 3 to 4 inches. That is part and parcel of the adaptation. It is not a character flaw. There is no value judgment. Rather, you are not advancing your fitness. Instead, you are advancing a very narrow bandwidth of a specialized capacity. Everyone probably knows what it is he or she does not want to see come out of the hopper. What I have learned about fitness, about sport training, about preparing yourself for the unknown and the unknowable is this. There is more traction, more advantage, more opportunity in pursuing headlong that event or skill that you do not want to see come out of the hopper than putting more time into the ones where you already excel. That thing you do not want to see come out of the hopper is a chink in your armor. It is a glaring deficiency in your general physical preparedness, GPP. And fixing it will give advantage where it does not always make sense, maybe mechanically or metabolically. We have countless examples of this from amateur and professional sports. At the heart of this is that we have learned some things about GPP that the world never knew before. There is more opportunity of advancing athletic performance via advancing GPP than there is in more sport-specific strength and conditioning training. For example, I am not sure why more pull-ups make for better skiers, but they do. We have some theories why that occurs, but we do not actually need to know the mechanism. We are focused on advancing performance. So the second model is a statistical model using skills and drills. I am looking for a balance of capacity across training modalities. The third model uses the 3 metabolic pathways. These are the 3 engines that produce adenosine triphosphate, ATP, the currency of effort of all energy output. Power is plotted on the y-axis and duration of effort, time, on the x-axis. The first pathway, phosphagen or phosphocreatine, is high-powered and short duration. It can account for about 100% of max human output and taps out at about 10 seconds. The second pathway, lactate or glycolytic, is moderate powered, moderate duration. It accounts for approximately 70% of max power. Output peaks at about 60 seconds and terminates at 120 seconds. The third pathway, oxidative or aerobic, is low-powered, long duration. It accounts for approximately 40% of max power output and does not fade in any reasonable time for which I have the patience to measure. The phosphagen and the glycolytic pathways are anaerobic. Oxidative is aerobic. All three engines work all the time to some extent. The degree to which each is active is dependent on the activity. One idles, while the other two rev, two will rev, one will idle, etc. Our thought is this. He or she is as fit as he or she is balanced in capacity in all three of these engines. A human being is a vehicle with three engines. Suppose we discover there is a fourth engine. We want capacity there too. We develop capacity in all engines through our prescription. Constantly varied functional movement executed at high intensity. We are looking for a balance in the bioenergetics, the engines that fuel all human activity. Definition of fitness, 2002 to 2008. Although clumsy, these three models served as a litmus test for the fitness we were after. And we moved forward. We launched CrossFit.com and posted the workout of the day, CWOD. Constantly varied, high-intensity functional movement. We were collecting the data from doing WODs and started asking, what does it really mean to do Fran? What does it really mean to do Helen? What does it mean to say that your time went from 7 minutes to 6 minutes to 5 minutes to 4 minutes? Some interesting things came of this. The workout Fran is 21-15-9 thrusters, 95 pounds, and pull-ups. Complete the workout by doing 21 thrusters, front squat 95 pounds, then drive it overhead. Then 21 pull-ups, get your chin over a bar from a hang anyhow. Then go back to the thrusters for 15 repetitions, 15 pull-ups, 9 of each, stop the clock, and we get a total time for the effort. Power is force times distance, work divided by time. The work required to do Fran is constant, force times distance. It does not change unless your height changes, distance. The distance we travel, the movement's range of motion, changes, the load changes, 95 pounds, or your weight changes. This means that every time you do Fran or a specific benchmark workout, the work is constant. So you do Fran for the first time and have a time one for it, T1. If you do it a year later, the same work was completed, but you have a separate time, T2. In comparing the two efforts, we find that the work quantity cancels and the difference in time is the difference in power produced, table 1. There will be measurement error in this calculation. I can measure the force charged to weight with a scale, the distance traveled with a tape measure, and time with a watch. There's not a lot of error therein, but there are some concerns as we are calculating the body's displacement by using the center of mass, for example. However, as long as the work is constant, the same error occurs with every effort. And in comparison from one effort to the next, the errors cancel each other out, zero order error. This ratio of time, T2 over T1, describes my progress to the accuracy and precision of the watch, which is the best of my three tools. Stopwatch, tape measure, scale. By tracking the difference in time between workout attempts, we are looking at changes in power. We did not have to study this much longer to come to this understanding that your collection of workout data points represented your work capacity across broad time and modal domains. This is your fitness. With power on the y-axis and duration of effort on the x-axis, the power output of any effort can be plotted. Take a handful of efforts that take approximately 10 seconds to do, measure their power output individually, and then get an average of these efforts. Repeat this exercise at 30 seconds, 2 minutes, 10 minutes, 60 minutes, etc. Plot these data points. With adequate scientific accuracy and precision, I have graphed mathematically an individual's work capacity across broad time and modal domains, figure 1. A fourth model and the definition of health, 2008. Along the way, in using these three models, we had also observed that there was a continuum of measures from sickness to wellness to fitness. If it was a measure I could quantify, something of interest to a physician or exercise physiologist, we find it would sit well ordered on this pattern. Take body fat, for example. If you are 40% body fat, that is considered morbidly obese. The numbers vary by community, but 15% is often considered well or normal. 5% is typically what you would see in an elite athlete. Bone density follows a similar pattern. There is a level of bone density that is pathological. It is osteoporosis or osteopenia in early stages. There is a value that is normal. We find gymnasts with 3 to 5 times normal bone density. I can do this with a resting heart rate, flexibility, any of the 10 general physical skills, and even some subjective things to which we cannot put numbers through analytical methods, e.g. mood. I do not know of a metric that runs counter to this pattern. This observation led us to believe that fitness and health were varying different measures of the same reality. This also means that if you are fit, you first have to become well to become pathologically sick. It tells me that fitness is a hedge against sickness, with wellness as an intermediate value. If there is anything in your lifestyle, training regimen, or recreational pursuits that has one of these metrics moving in a wrong direction, I want you to entertain the possibility you are doing something profoundly wrong. What we find is when you do CrossFit, constantly varied, high-intensity functional movements, eat meat and vegetables, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch, no sugar, and get plenty of sleep every night, we do not have this divergent side effect. It does not work such that everything is improving except one value. We knew this observation could be another test in assessing one's fitness regimen. Recall that we represent fitness as the area under the curve on a graph with power on the y-axis and duration of effort on the x-axis. By adding a third dimension, age, on the z-axis and extending the fitness across, it produces a three-dimensional and solid figure 2. That is health. And with this measure, I have the same relationship to things that seemingly matter. High-density lipoproteins, HDL, triglycerides, heart rate, anything that the doctor would tell you is important. I am of the opinion that health would be maximally held by maximizing your area under the curve and holding that work capacity for as long as you can. In other words, eat meat and vegetables, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch, no sugar. Do constantly varied high-intensity exercise. Learn and play new sports throughout your life. This will buy you more health than will trying to fix your cholesterol or bone density with a pharmaceutical intervention. That it is a failed approach. I want you to understand how these definitions of fitness and health are different than those found in exercise science literature. First, understand that our definitions of these quantities are measurable. One of the problems with exercise science is that it would very rarely meet the rigors of any real science, chemistry, physics, engineering. Secondly, it is also almost never about exercise. For example, maximal oxygen consumption, VO2 max, and lactate threshold are correlates, maybe components, but absolutely subordinate to what happens to work capacity. Who would take an increase in VO2 max for a decrease in work capacity across broad time and modal domains? What that would look like is breathing more air than you ever had before on a treadmill test in a lab, but losing the road race. Similarly, someone's lactate threshold could increase, but he or she still gets choked out in the fight because of lack of work capacity. I could make a list of hundreds of these metrics, and no one has ever produced a great athlete by advancing them one at a time. It does not happen. I can move them best by doing constantly varied, high-intensity functional movements, doing things that look like Fran, Diane, Helen, turning fitness into sport by working with fixed workloads and trying to minimize the time by making every workout a competitive effort among the cohort. And when I do that, what we find is that these metrics do spectacular things. Suppose a man at 90 years old is living independently, running up and down the steps and playing with his grandchildren. We would not be concerned if his cholesterol numbers were high. There's a problem looking only at longevity. Imagine a curve that stretches to 90 or even 105 years, but has very low work capacity for its duration. That is not what CrossFit is about. It is about vitality and capacity. What can you do? It is imperative for making meaningful assertions about training that fitness and health are measurable. The area or volume under the curve gives me a scientifically accurate, precise, and valid measure of an athlete's fitness or health. And we are the first to have ever done that. When we showed this to physicists, chemists, engineers, they agreed there is no other way to assess the capacity of something, be it a rocket, motorcycle, truck, or human. Tell me how much it weighs, how far it moves, and how long it takes. Everything else is entirely irrelevant. Quote, learn the mechanics of fundamental movements. Establish a consistent pattern of practicing these same movements. And Only then ratchet up the intensity of workouts incorporating these movements. Mechanics, then consistency, and then intensity. This is the key to effective implementation of CrossFit programming. Coach Glassman technique. Adapted from Coach Glassman's December 1, 2007, L1 lecture in Charlotte, North Carolina. In no small part, what is behind this program is the quantification of fitness. This means we put a number on fitness work capacity across broad time and modal domains. You can assess one's fitness by determining the area under his or her work capacity curve. This would be similar to a group of athletes competing in 25 to 30 workouts. Include a range of activities like 3 pulls on the concept, 2 rower for average watts to a 10-mile run, and a multitude of workouts in between. Compile their overall placing across these events, and everyone then has a reasonable metric of his or her total capacity. This quantification of fitness is a part of a broader concept that is at the heart of this movement. We call it evidence-based fitness. This means measurable, observable, repeatable data is used in analyzing and assessing a fitness program. There are 3 meaningful components to analysis of a fitness program: safety, efficacy, and efficiency. The efficacy of a program means what is the return? Maybe a fitness program advertises that it will make you a better soccer player. There needs to be evidence of this supported by measurable, observable, repeatable data. For CrossFit, we want to increase your work capacity across broad time and modal domains. This is the efficacy of this program. What are the tangible results? What is the adaptation that the program induces? Efficiency is the time rate of that adaptation. Maybe the fitness program advertises that it can deliver 50 pull-ups. There is a big difference whether it takes 6 months versus 9 years to achieve that. Safety is how many people end up at the finish line. Suppose I have a fitness program. I start with 10 individuals. 2 of them become the fittest human beings on earth and the other 8 die, while I would rather be one of the 2 fittest than the 8 dead, and I do not know if I want to play. I am not going to attach a normative value to it. The real tragedy comes in not knowing the safety numbers. These 3 vectors of safety, efficacy, and efficiency point in the same direction, such that they are not entirely at odds with each other. I can greatly increase the safety of a program by turning the efficacy and efficiency down to 0. I can increase the efficiency by turning up the intensity and then possibly compromising safety. Or I could damage the efficacy by losing people. Safety, efficacy, and efficiency are the 3 meaningful aspects of a program. They give me all I need to assess it. This quantification of fitness by choosing work capacity as our standard for the efficacy of the program necessitates the qualification of movement. Our quantification of fitness introduces qualification of movement, technique, form, and style. I will not delve into them with too much detail. The distinction is not that important. I use both technique and form somewhat interchangeably, although there is a slightly nuanced distinction. When I talk about angular velocity, momentum, leverage, origin, or insertion of muscles, torque, force, power, relative angles, we are talking about mechanics. When I speak to the physics of movement, and especially the statics, and less so the dynamics, I am looking at the mechanics. Technique is the method to success for completion of a movement. For example, if you want to do a full twisting dismount on the rings, the technique would be pull, let go, look, arm up, turn, shoulder drop, etc. Technique includes head posture and body posture, and there are effective and less effective techniques. Technique includes the mechanics, but it is in the macro sense of how do you complete the movement without the physics? Form is the normative value. This is good or this is bad. You should or you shouldn't apply to mechanics and technique. Style is essentially the signature to a movement. That is, that aspect of the movement that is fairly unique to you. The best of the weightlifting coaches can look at the bar path during a lift and tell you which lifter it is. There are aspects to all of our movements that define us like your thumbprint. It is the signature. To be truly just the signature, style elements have no bearing on form, technique, or mechanics. Style does not enter into the normative assessment, is not important to technique, and does not alter substantially the physics. These 4 terms are all qualifications to movement. I want to speak generally to technique and form to include all of this. But what we are talking about here is the non-quantification of output, that is how you move, by taking power or work capacity as our primary value for assessing technique. And this reliance on functional movement, we end up in kind of an interesting position. We end up where power is the successful completion of functional movement. This is not about merely energy exerted on a graph. You could put work completed on the x-axis and energy expended on the y-axis. Someone could potentially expend a lot of energy and do very little work by being inefficient. Ideally, what that individual would do would see little energy expended for the maximum amount of work. Technique is what maximizes the work completed for the energy expended, figure 1. For any given capacity, say metabolically for energy expenditure, the guy who knows the technique is going to be able to do the most amount of work. Suppose I take 2 people at random and they are both trying the same task. One is familiar with how to deadlift and one is not. One knows how to clean, one does not. One knows how to drive overhead, one does not. Suppose they are loading a truck with sandbags. The one familiar with lifting large objects and transporting them is going to do a lot more work. You can have the argument as to who is stronger. For example, you can use an electromyogram and see with what force the biceps shortens. If you are defining strength as contractile potential, you may end up with the guy with enormous contractile potential, but not knowing the technique of the clean, the jerk, the deadlift, he cannot do as much work. We, however, do not take contractile potential as the gold standard for strength. Strength is the productive application of force. If you cannot complete work, if you cannot express strength as power, if strength cannot be expressed as productive result, it does not count. Having enormous biceps and quadriceps is useless if you cannot run, jump, lift, throw, press. This is related to safety, efficacy, and efficiency, because technique, quality of movement, is the heart of maximizing each of these. He or she who knows how to do these movements when confronted with them will get a better result in terms of safety. 2 individuals attempt to lift a heavy object. One knows how to pop a hip and get under it clean, and the other guy starts to pull with a rounded back. I can tell you what is likely to happen to he or she who does not know how to lift. If you want to stay safe, you better have good technique, good form. Efficacy, for any given contractile potential, for any given limit to your total metabolic capacity, he or she who knows the technique will be able to get more work done and will develop faster. If after 6 months of teaching you how to clean it still does not look like I would like it to, you will not get twice body weight overhead more quickly than someone who looks like a natural. You want an effective program, you are going to have to move with quality, you want to get the result quickly. Technique is going to be pivotal to your success. Technique is an intimate part of safety, efficacy, and efficiency. We can see how this manifests in CrossFit workouts by way of a comparison. I want to look at typing, shooting, playing the violin, NASCAR driving, and CrossFit. What these domains have in common is that a marked proficiency is associated with speed. Being able to shoot accurately and quickly is better than quickly or accurately. You may try to get a job as a typist because you do not make any mistakes. However, for this perfection, you type at a rate of 20 words a minute and only use 2 fingers. You will never get hired. Playing the violin fast and error-free is critical for a virtuoso. However, someone who gets through Flight of the Bumblebee in 12 minutes is not there yet. A NASCAR driver wants to both drive fast and not wreck. In CrossFit, a perfectly exquisite Fran is worthless if it takes 32 minutes. And yet, it is presented to CrossFit coaches as, should I use good form or should I do it quickly? I do not like my choices. One is impossible without the other. Technique and speed are not at odds with one another, where speed is related to all the quantification of the movement: power, force, distance, time. They are seemingly at odds. It is a misapprehension. It is an illusion. Can you learn to drive fast without wrecking? Can you learn to type fast without making errors? Can you shoot quickly without missing? Eventually, but not in the learning. One is impossible without the other. You will not learn to type fast without typing where you make a ton of errors and then work to reduce the errors at that speed. Then you go faster and then again pull the errors back in. Then go faster and pull the errors back in. You drive faster and faster and then you spin out in the infield or you hit the wall. If you are a race driver and you have never spun out, gone out in the infield, or never been in a wreck, you are not very good. If you are a typist and you have never made a mistake, you are very slow. In CrossFit, If your technique is perfect, your intensity is always low. Here's the part that is hardest to understand. You will not maximize the intensity or the speed without mistakes. But it is not the mistakes that make you faster. It is not reaching for the letter P with your pinky and hitting the O. It is not hitting the wrong note that made you play faster. It is not missing the target by 2 feet that made you a better shooter. It is not running into the wall that made you a faster driver. But you will not get there without it. The errors are an unavoidable consequence of development. This iterative process of letting the scope of errors broaden, then reducing them without reducing the speed, is called threshold training. In a CrossFit workout, if you are moving well, I will tell you to pick up the speed. Suppose at the higher speed, the movement still looks good. I will encourage you to go faster. And if it still looks good, I will encourage you to go even faster. Now the movement starts falling apart. I do not want you to slow down yet. First, at that speed, I want you to fix your technique. What you need to do is continuously and constantly advance the margins at which form falters. It may be that initially at 10,000 foot-pounds per minute, my technique is perfect, but it falls apart at 12,000 foot-pounds per minute. Work at that 10,000 to 12,000 foot-pounds per minute mark to fix the form, and soon enough, you will have great technique at 12,000 foot-pounds per minute. The next step is to achieve that technique at 14,000 foot-pounds per minute. At first, the technique at 14,000 foot-pounds per minute will suffer. Then you must narrow it in. That is the process. It is ineluctable. It is unavoidable. There is nothing I can do about it. That is not my rule. We are the technique people. We drill technique incessantly, but simultaneously, I want you to go faster. You will learn to work at higher intensity with good technique only by ratcheting up the intensity to a point where good technique is impossible. This dichotomy means that it is impossible at the limits of your capacity to obey every little detail and nuance of technique. Some of the refined motor recruitment patterns are not going to always look perfect. I do not know of a domain where speed matters and technique is not at the heart of it. In every athletic endeavor where we can quantify the output, there is incredible technique at the highest levels of performance. Suppose someone set the new world record for the shot put, but his technique was poor. This means one of two things. One, either with good technique, it would have gone farther, or two, we were wrong in understanding what is good technique. Technique is everything. It is at the heart of our quantification. You will not express power in significant measure without technique. You might expend a lot of energy, but you will not see the productive application of force. You will not be able to complete functional tasks efficiently or effectively. You will not be safe in trying. There is a perceived paradox here that really is not a paradox when you understand the factors at play. Fitness, luck, and health. CrossFit LLC holds a uniquely elegant solution to the greatest problem facing the world today. It is not global warming or climate change. It is not the worst two choices imaginable for president. It is chronic disease. The CrossFit stimulus, which is constantly varied, high-intensity functional movement coupled with meat and vegetables, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch, and no sugar, can give you a pass on chronic disease. It is elegant in the mathematical sense of being marked by simplicity and efficacy. It is so simple. There is still over 200 pages of the manual. I encourage you to take either the online course or in person, even if you aren't looking to coach. You will learn so much as to why we do what we do and propel your health and fitness journey. Cheers, Andy McCann, owner of CrossFit Garage.